I had just signed the papers, $52 million. My hands were trembling as I held the check, not from nervousness, but from pure exhilaration. 28 years of building my real estate portfolio, property by property, and it all came down to this moment. A private equity firm wanted everything. Every apartment complex, every commercial building, every piece of land I had acquired since I was 32 years old. This was my baby, my life's work. And I couldn't wait to share this moment with David. I practically ran to my car in the parking garage. The leather portfolio with all the closing documents felt heavy in my arms, but my heart felt light. David and I had weathered so much together over our 25 years of marriage. He had been there when I bought my first duplex with money I had saved before we even met. He had held my hand through the late nights, the difficult tenants, the market crashes. And now, finally, we could retire. We could travel like we had always dreamed, maybe buy that villa in Tuscany we had talked about. The drive home to our house in Bellevue took forever, even though I was probably speeding. I kept imagining his face when I told him. We would open that bottle of 1,982 Chateau Margaux we had been saving. We would call our daughter Emily in Boston. We would finally relax. I pulled into our circular driveway and noticed David's Mercedes was already there. Perfect. It was only 3 p.m, but he must have come home early from his consulting firm. Maybe he somehow knew this was the day. I used my key quietly, wanting to surprise him. The house was silent except for a faint sound coming from upstairs. I paused at the bottom of the staircase, listening. Music. Was that music coming from our bedroom? David never listened to music in the middle of the afternoon. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. The portfolio was getting heavier. Something felt wrong, but I pushed the feeling away. Maybe he was just relaxing, taking a rare afternoon off. The bedroom door was closed. The music was clearer now, some jazz piano piece. I reached for the handle, and then I heard it. A woman's laugh, light, breathy, intimate, coming from inside our bedroom. My hand froze on the doorknob. My brain couldn't process what I was hearing. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the TV was on. Maybe David was on a video call with a client. But then I heard his voice. Low, murmuring, followed by another laugh from the woman. I should have thrown open that door right then. I should have confronted them immediately. But instead, I stood there, frozen, as my entire world tilted sideways. My phone. I pulled it from my purse with shaking hands and opened the app connected to our home security cameras. We had installed them 2 years ago after a break-in in the neighborhood. David had insisted. For your safety, he had said, when I'm traveling. I navigated to the bedroom camera, the one hidden in the smoke detector. My finger hovered over the screen. Did I really want to see this? I pressed it. The image loaded. And there, on our bed, the bed we had shared for 25 years, was my husband, with a woman I didn't recognize. She looked young, maybe 30, blonde, beautiful, and very naked. I watched for exactly 30 seconds. Watched as my husband kissed this stranger in our home. Watched as she ran her fingers through his hair the same way I used to. Watched as they moved together like they had done this 1,000 times before. I closed the app. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Something cold and hard had settled in my chest, replacing the shock with something else, clarity. I turned around and walked back down the stairs, my heels clicking deliberately on each step. I wanted them to hear me. I wanted them to panic. I went into David's home office and sat down at his desk. His computer was still on, unlocked. Of course it was. David had always been careless about security. I opened his email. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe a few flirty messages, maybe evidence of a recent affair, something that had just started. What I found was worse. So much worse. The emails went back 5 years. 5 years. There were hundreds of them, thousands, all to the same person, Natalie Peterson. I started reading. I couldn't stop reading. The affair had started at a business conference in Miami. David had been there for his consulting work. She had been there representing a tech startup. They had met at the hotel bar. One thing led to another, but it didn't end in Miami. The emails showed meticulous planning, hotel reservations in cities where David claimed to be traveling for work, weekend getaways while I was supposedly attending real estate conventions, afternoons at her apartment across town. I scrolled through the dates, matching them to my memories, and felt sick. 5 years ago. That was the year Emily got married. I remembered David holding my hand during the ceremony, tears in his eyes as we watched our daughter walk down the aisle. 3 days later, according to these emails, he was in San Francisco with Natalie, telling her how much he missed her, how the wedding had been torture because all he could think about was her. 4 years ago, my mother died. I had been devastated. David had been so supportive, so present. He had held me while I cried, made all the funeral arrangements, delivered the eulogy when I couldn't speak. 2 weeks after we buried my mother, he had taken Natalie to the Bahamas. The email photos showed them on a beach, his arm around her waist, both of them grinning at the camera. 3 years ago, I had surgery for a herniated disc. I was in the hospital for 3 days, in pain, scared. David visited every day, brought me flowers, told me how much he loved me. But according to the emails, he left the hospital each evening and went straight to Natalie's apartment. He had even joked with her about it. "Duty calls in the morning, pleasure at night," he had written. 2 years ago, Emily announced she was pregnant with our first grandchild. We had celebrated together, David and I, already planning how we would spoil our grandbaby. The same week, David had written to Natalie about his exit strategy. He was planning to leave me once I turned 65. Just 2 more years, he had written. 2 more years until my Medicare kicked in, until the divorce would be less complicated financially. 1 year ago, Emily gave birth to little James. David and I flew to Boston together. We spent a week there, helping our daughter, bonding with our grandson. I remembered watching David hold that tiny baby, remembered thinking how lucky I was to have such a devoted husband and father. The email he sent Natalie from the airport on our way home said, "Can't wait to wash the baby smell off me and see you tonight. Missed you every second." I closed the laptop. I had read enough. I sat in that office for a long time, listening to the silence. They were still upstairs. They had no idea I was home. I thought about everything I had built. I had started with nothing. My parents had been immigrants from Mexico, factory workers who saved every penny to send me to college. I had worked my way through school, gotten my real estate license at 23, bought my first property at 24 with money I had earned and saved myself. David and I had met when I was 30. He was charming, successful, ambitious. We got married 2 years later. I had 3 properties by then. I made him sign a prenuptial agreement. My lawyer had insisted, "Protect what you built," she had said. David had seemed hurt, but he signed, and I had felt guilty about it for years. Every anniversary, every time he did something thoughtful, I would think about that prenup and feel like I had started our marriage with distrust. Now I understood. That prenup was going to save my life. Over the next 25 years, I had built an empire. David had his consulting firm, made good money, but my real estate portfolio had grown exponentially. I bought during the 2008 crash. I sold high. I reinvested. I built. And I had kept everything separate, just as the prenup required. My properties were in my name. My business accounts were separate. David had his own money, his own investments, but we had kept our finances divided. He didn't know about the sale. I hadn't told him yet. The $52 million was mine. Completely, legally mine. A plan began forming in my mind. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney, Margaret Chen. She had been with me since the beginning, had drafted that prenup 25 years ago. "Margaret," I said quietly when she answered, "I need to see you, now. It's urgent." "Victoria? Are you all right? You sound—" "I'm fine," I interrupted. "I just found out my husband has been having an affair for 5 years. I have proof, and I need to know exactly how to protect the money from the sale before I file for divorce." There was a pause. "I'll clear my schedule. Can you be here in 20 minutes? I'm on my way." I stood up, grabbed my portfolio with the closing documents, and walked out of that house. I didn't look back. I didn't go upstairs. I just left. At Margaret's office, I showed her everything. The emails, the timeline, the sale documents. She listened, her expression grave, taking notes. "First thing, she said when I finished. That money is yours, completely. It's from property you owned before the marriage and built with your own capital. The prenup is ironclad. He has no claim to any of it. I felt something unclench in my chest. Second, she continued, we file immediately. Today, before he has any chance to hide assets or prepare. You have proof of adultery, which in Washington state can affect the division of community property. His consulting firm, his retirement accounts, anything acquired during the marriage, we'll make sure you get your fair share of those too. I want more than fair, I heard myself say. I want everything. Margaret smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Tell me everything you know about his business, I told her. About the consulting firm he had built over the years, about his clients, about the retirement accounts, and then I told her something else, something I had noticed in those emails. He's been using our home office for meetings with Natalie, during business hours, claiming the home office as a business expense on his taxes, but he's been using it for personal reasons. Margaret's eyes lit up. That's tax fraud if we can prove it. I can prove it. I have security camera footage, and the emails reference specific dates and times. Victoria, Margaret said, leaning forward, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. How far do you want to take this? I thought about those emails, about my mother's funeral, about Emily's wedding, about holding my grandson while David counted down the days until he could leave me. All the way, I said. I want him to lose everything. Then here's what we're going to do. Margaret laid out the plan. File for divorce immediately. Claim adultery. Subpoena all his business records. Report the tax fraud to the IRS. Go after his consulting firm's assets. Make sure the affair became public knowledge, which would destroy his professional reputation. It won't be easy, she warned. It will be ugly. Are you sure? I nodded. I'm sure, but there's one more thing. I don't want him to know about the $52 million until the divorce is finalized. I want it protected first. We can do that. The closing just happened today. As long as you don't deposit it in any joint accounts and we file the paperwork immediately, there's no way for him to claim it. It doesn't exist as far as the divorce is concerned. Perfect. We spent the next 3 hours preparing documents. By 6 p.m., everything was ready. Margaret's process server was standing by. One question, Margaret said as I was about to leave. Where are you going to stay tonight? I hadn't thought about that. I couldn't go home. Not yet. I'll get a hotel. Stay with your sister, Margaret suggested. You need family right now. My sister, Rosa. She lived across town with her husband and 2 teenage kids. I hadn't even told her yet. I called her from the car. Rosa, it's me. Can I stay with you tonight? I'll explain when I get there. Of course. Vic, what's wrong? You sound. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Rosa took one look at my face when I arrived and sent her husband and kids upstairs. We sat in her kitchen, and I told her everything. She didn't cry. She just got angrier and angrier until she was pacing the kitchen, swearing in Spanish the way our mother used to. 25 years, she kept saying. 25 years and he does this? And during Mama's funeral? I will kill him. I will actually kill him. Get in line, I said. She stopped pacing and looked at me. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy him. Rosa smiled. Good. What do you need? A place to stay. And a witness. Tomorrow morning, the process server is going to deliver divorce papers to the house. I want you there with me when it happens. The next morning, Rosa and I arrived at the house at 8 a.m. David's car was still in the driveway. The process server, a woman named Janet, was waiting down the street. I used my key and walked in. David was in the kitchen, making coffee, wearing his robe. He looked up when I entered and smiled. Hey! Babe! Where were you last night? I tried calling. I just stared at him. This man I had loved for 25 years. This stranger. Victoria? He looked concerned now. Is everything okay? The doorbell rang. That's for you, I said. David frowned and went to answer it. I heard Janet's voice. David Martinez? I have documents for you. I walked into the foyer. David was holding the envelope, looking confused. What is this? Open it, I said. He did. I watched his face as he read the first page, watched the confusion turn to shock, then to panic. Divorce papers. Victoria, What? Why would you? We can talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. You've been having an affair for 5 years, I said calmly. With Natalie Peterson. I've read every email. I've seen the security footage. It's over. His face went white. You? How did you? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's done. You need to move out today. Wait. He held up his hands. Just wait. Let's talk about this. Yes, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we have 25 years together. We have Emily, we have James. You can't just throw that all away. I'm not the one who threw it away. You did. 5 years ago. It didn't mean anything, he said desperately. She doesn't mean anything. It was just stress relief. You know how hard I've been working. I laughed. I actually laughed. Stress relief. Is that what you call it when you take her to the Bahamas 2 weeks after my mother's funeral? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Pack your things and get out, I said. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, I'm changing the locks. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. I bought this house with my money before we got married. It's mine. Just like everything else I've built is mine. I saw something shift in his expression then. Calculation replacing panic. The prenup, he said slowly. You're hiding behind the prenup. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm protecting what's mine. Fine. His voice turned cold. You want a divorce? You'll get a divorce. But I want half of everything acquired during the marriage. My lawyer will be in touch. Looking forward to it, I said. He stormed upstairs. Rosa, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, came to stand beside me. You okay? She whispered. Better than okay, I said. David came back down 30 minutes later with 2 suitcases. He walked past me without a word and slammed the door on his way out. I waited until I heard his car pull away. Then I sat down on the stairs and finally let myself feel it. The grief, the betrayal, the rage. Rosa sat beside me and held my hand while I cried. The divorce took 6 months. 6 brutal months. David hired a shark of a lawyer who went after everything. They tried to claim I had commingled assets. They tried to invalidate the prenup. They tried to argue that David had contributed to my success and deserved compensation. Margaret demolished every argument. She presented the emails showing David's affair. She presented the security footage. She presented proof of his tax fraud, which we had reported to the IRS. And here's what David didn't know. I still hadn't told him about the $52 million. During discovery, his lawyers asked about my assets. Margaret listed everything accurately. My properties, my accounts, my investments. But the sale had closed the day I found out about the affair, and the money was sitting in a trust account under my company's name, completely separate from anything marital. David's lawyers never asked the right questions. 3 months into the divorce, David made a mistake. He got cocky. He filed a motion asking for spousal support, claimed he had sacrificed his career to support mine, claimed he deserved to maintain the lifestyle he had become accustomed to. Margaret was delighted. He just opened the door for us to examine his lifestyle in detail, she said, including how much he's been spending on his mistress. We presented evidence of every hotel room, every gift, every vacation David had purchased for Natalie over 5 years, tens of thousands of dollars, all spent during the marriage. The judge was not impressed. Then the IRS contacted David about the audit we had triggered. His tax fraud was going to cost him. His lawyer tried to negotiate. My client is willing to walk away from spousal support in exchange for dropping the tax fraud investigation, they offered. No, I said. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Victoria, that's actually a good... No, I repeated. He doesn't get to cheat, steal, and then negotiate his way out of consequences. Let the IRS finish their investigation. So we did. 4 months in, David's consulting firm started losing clients. Word had gotten out about the affair and the divorce. In the business world, reputation matters. Clients started dropping him quietly, not wanting to be associated with someone who was being audited by the IRS and going through a messy divorce. His income plummeted. 5 months in, Natalie left him. I found this out through Emily, who heard it from one of David's colleagues. Apparently, Natalie had thought David was wealthy. When she realized the divorce was going to leave him with relatively little and that he was facing tax fraud charges, she disappeared, deleted her social media, moved to another state, blocked his number. David called me, drunk, at 2 a.m. "This is all your fault," he slurred. "You destroyed my life. You couldn't just forgive me like a normal person. You had to take everything." "You took everything first," I said, and hung up. 6 months in, we finalized the divorce. I kept the house. I kept all my properties and business assets. I kept my retirement accounts. David kept his struggling consulting firm and whatever was left of his retirement after paying his legal fees and the IRS penalties. The community property division gave me an additional settlement since his firm had been built during our marriage, even though he ran it. The day the decree was finalized, I deposited the $52 million into my personal accounts. David never knew it existed. I was 62 years old, single for the first time in 25 years, and wealthier than I had ever imagined. And I was terrified. I stayed with Rosa for 2 months after the divorce, even though I had my house back. I couldn't face being alone in that big house with all those memories. "What are you going to do now?" Rosa asked me one night over wine. "I don't know," I admitted. "I spent so long building my business, being a wife, being a mother. Now I've sold the business, I'm not a wife anymore, and Emily has grown with her own family. Who am I now?" "You're Victoria Martinez," Rosa said firmly. "You're a woman who built an empire from nothing. You're a survivor. You're free. Now you get to figure out what you want to do with that freedom." I thought about that for a long time. What did I want? I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world I had been too busy building my career to explore. I wanted to spend time with my daughter and grandson without the weight of a failing marriage on my shoulders. I wanted to wake up every morning without wondering if my husband was lying to me. I wanted to live. So I did. I bought a condo in Boston near Emily. I spent weeks there at a time, being a grandmother, spoiling James rotten, helping my daughter navigate new motherhood. I traveled. I went to Tuscany and bought that villa I had dreamed about, but just for myself. I spent a month there, learning to paint, eating incredible food, speaking Italian with the locals. I went to Japan, to New Zealand, to Peru, places I had always wanted to see. And slowly, somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling broken. A year after the divorce, I ran into someone at an art gallery in Seattle. His name was Thomas. He was 65, a retired architect, a widower. We started talking about the painting we were both admiring, and the conversation flowed so easily that 2 hours passed before I realized it. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. We started having coffee, then dinner, then weekend trips to the coast. Thomas was kind. He was honest. He loved hearing about my properties and my business success. He showed me his architectural designs and talked about buildings the way I talked about real estate, with passion and pride. He never made me feel like I had to be smaller to fit into his life. 6 months later, Emily and I were having lunch in Boston when she said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart clenched. "What is it?" "Dad came by yesterday." I put down my fork. "Oh?" "He wanted to borrow money. He said his business is failing. He said the IRS penalties bankrupted him. He said Natalie cleaned out his bank account before she left." Emily shook her head. "He asked me to ask you if you would help him." "What did you say?" I told him no. I told him what he did to you was unforgivable. I told him that if he ever tried to contact you again, I would get a restraining order on your behalf. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know he's my father, but what he did to you, I can't forgive that. I won't." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. You're a good daughter. I'm proud of you." "Are you happy now?" she asked. "Really happy?" I thought about Thomas, waiting for me back in Seattle, about the villa in Tuscany, about the art classes I was taking, about waking up every morning without that knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Yes," I said, "I really am." 2 years after the divorce, I married Thomas in a small ceremony at the Tuscany villa. Emily and James were there, Rosa and her family, a handful of close friends. It was perfect. On our wedding night, Thomas and I sat on the terrace, looking out over the vineyard, drinking wine. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Okay. The real estate portfolio I sold, It was for $52 million. I never told David about the sale. He went through the entire divorce, not knowing that money existed. He thought he was fighting over a few properties and retirement accounts. He had no idea. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he started laughing. "You're brilliant. You know that? I learned the hard way to protect what's mine." He raised his glass. "To protecting what's ours, together this time. But separately documented, because I insist you keep a prenup with me too." I laughed and clinked my glass against his. I thought about David sometimes, about what he must have felt when he realized what he had lost. Not just the money he never knew about, but everything else. His wife, his daughter's respect, his business, his mistress, his reputation. He had thrown it all away for what? 5 years of hotel rooms and lies? For someone who left him the moment things got hard? I didn't feel sorry for him. I had wasted enough time on David Martinez. Instead, I felt grateful. Grateful that I had found out. Grateful that I had built my empire with my own hands so I had something to protect. Grateful for that prenup I had felt guilty about for 25 years. Grateful for Margaret's ruthless legal skills. Grateful for Rosa's unwavering support. Grateful for Emily's love. And grateful that I had the courage to walk away. Because here's what I learned. Money can't buy happiness. But financial independence? That bought me freedom. And freedom gave me the chance to find real happiness. I was 64 years old. I had a husband who loved me. A daughter who respected me. A grandson who adored me. And more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But more than that, I had myself back. And that was worth more than $52 million. That was priceless.